It's great to have you here for this special parent team webinar themed around the Black History Month. And we're really delighted because it's one of the few ones where we're having not just the parents, but we're having our young people as well, the teenagers. So it does promise to be an exciting and insightful conversation across various generations. The theme for today is around parenting while Black, then and now, a cross-generational conversation. It'll be great to just hear from all of us through the lens of Black History Month, what the experiences of parenting have been. We're going to be exploring issues of parenting, culture, and identity across various generations, as I mentioned, but through the lens of Black and diverse communities. It promises to be real conversations between parents and teens, and we aim to bridge understanding, celebrate resilience, but also reimagine how families can grow together with love, respect, and pride in their culture and their heritage. Now, before we go into the conversation proper, just to say that all the conversations we have this evening are in trust, are in confidence, and everyone should feel free to express themselves in the spirit of Black History Month. But at the same time, we all need to be respectful of each other's opinions and views as well. So Chatham House rules, yeah? Respectful of each other's opinions, respectful of each other's views, and just listen with a view to understanding the next person's perspective. So before going into the questions proper, I'd like to introduce our panelists, the guests we have with us here today. The first person with us is Eva, or I would like to introduce first Eva. Eva is actually one of our volunteers with AfriKindness. She works within the IT and digital team. Now, Eva is a digital innovation lead with experience across major organizations in healthcare and technology. And she's driven by a passion for transforming ideas into impactful solutions. She's originally from Greece and moved to the UK at 18 to study engineering and has built her career in London. Most recently, she spent time in East Africa working on wildlife conservation projects, which has deepened her interest in sustainability and global collaboration. So she comes with a wealth of experience in terms of understanding diverse cultures, diverse communities, and her perspectives from all of these different places where she's been. So thanks for being here with us today, Eva. It's great to have you here. We also have with us Philomena. Philomena is also one of our panelists here today, Amorua Philomena. Philomena is an experienced professional with over a decade of leadership in customer service and relationship management in Nigeria's banking sector. She's currently a nursing assistant and is a graduate of project management as well. She's really passionate about community, about culture and intergenerational growth. And she is a strong advocate for compassion, contentment, resilience, respect, and emotional intelligence. All very important issues that we'll be dealing with today, but also that cut across the various programs that we put out there as the parent team for AfriKindness. So we're really delighted to have Philomena with us today, or Phil, as we like to call her very fondly. Thanks for being here with us. And just to say that Phil is also here with Pell, who's one of our Pioneer Teen Academy cohort members. So we're delighted to have both of them here with us today. Thank you. Next, we also have, as part of the panel, Tenny. So we have with us Tenny as well, Dr. Olateni Adeoye. Tenny is a consultant hematologist. She has degrees in MBB from Lautech, and she's also a fellow with FAWCP and Lab Medicine. She presently works as a CAR-T hematology specialty doctor at Leeds Teaching Hospital in the NHS Trust. And she's here as well with her child. And we're really delighted to have both of them here because it would be great to share their perspectives on the issues that are being discussed in today's session. So really grateful to you, Tenny, for being here, and delighted that we also have Nifemi here with us as well. Next, we have Tolu Owolabi, a trustee with AfriKindness. Tolu is a highly accomplished in commercial operations management and a technical expert with over 20 years of professional experience across various industries, including energy, project management, and business development, spanning 3 continents. So he comes with a wealth of experience in cultural perspectives on parenting, and he's driven by a guiding principle of purposeful existence as well as a commitment to service. His operating values include integrity, teamwork, and a passion for scientific advancement, which I'm sure most of us have also already experienced working with him in various capacities within Africaneness. Toulouse here with Temi, and we're delighted that both of you are here. Tim is also one of our pioneer cohort members for the Africaneness Teens Academy, as is Nifemi. Thanks for being here, Tulu, and thanks for being here, Timmy, as well. Next, we have Fasilat Lawal, also here as one of our panelists. Fasilat is a clinical research nurse. She's really passionate about what she does, and she works within the Leeds Teaching Hospital NHS Trust as well. She's got 3 lovely children, whom we've been privileged to meet as well as part of the Africaneness Teens Academy, and we're very grateful that we have Hassan with us here today as part of the conversation. Abdul Rahman, we're delighted to have you here. He's also one of our pioneer cohort members for the Africaneness Teen Academy. So we're delighted to have both parents and teens and our adults in the room today for this conversation. Without further ado, we'll just get into it. In the meantime, just to say that if anyone has questions, feel free to use the Q&A function so that as we go along, we can raise those questions with our panelists. So anyone who has a question, use the Q&A function. And then if you have a comment or you just want to say something to the panelists or to others in the room, feel free to use the chat function. With the Q&A, we can follow the conversation and then ask the questions directly to the panelists. We'll start with a brief set of questions, which I have noted down as conversation starters. And then in the course of the session, if you have any specific questions you want to ask, I'll be just looking out for the Q&A and I'll put those directly to the panelists as well. At any point at all, feel free to just put in the questions and be rest assured that we'll pick them up and present them to the panelists. So thank you very much. And let's get into it. So as I mentioned, today's conversation is around 4 key themes. The first is cultural context, and we want to understand the ways in which the cultural context has impacted on parenting, but we want to understand it both from the perspectives of the adults in the room as well as from the perspectives of the young people or the teenagers in the room. And so the first question I'd like to ask is, how has culture shaped the way your family approaches parenting and growing up overall? And maybe I'll ask Eva to kick off the conversation for us. So over to you, Eva.
Thank you, Patty, and thanks for the question. I guess there's many different directions that this question could go into, but I would like to share my experience moving to the UK because I think it's very relevant. So growing up, I never questioned the meaning of culture, because culture was so ingrained in society, that was so fundamental to the way we lived and interacted with others. So what actually allowed me to put culture into perspective was moving to the UK when I was 18. And it was actually the first time that I started to notice how behaviors, habits, and values differed to what I was used to. And I remember vividly the very first group of friends I made when I joined university here. So I was studying engineering, which is a very male-dominated degree. And one day we had a computer lab activity where we had to work in pairs. So I remember entering the room, so the lab with the computers, and I looked around looking for an empty seat and noticed that everyone was very absorbed into their screens, apart from this one girl that looked at me and smiled. And that very short interaction felt so familiar and inviting that it was like a moment of warmth for me in a very unfamiliar space. And from that moment, not only did we become lab partners with this girl, and this girl is called Aisha. She became one of my closest friends from uni, and it was the start of a friendship that is still alive to today. So Aisha is from Nigeria and I'm from Greece. And in the following months, we met another girl from Brazil and a girl from China. And we formed a very close friendship that we used to joke and call it the intercontinental friendship. We initially connected over the fact that we shared the common experience of, being strangers in a foreign country, studying the same course. But what I felt brought us very close was the fact that we had a curiosity about each other, the differences, but also our similarities, and the fact that we grew up in a family-oriented environment with role models that focused very much on education. The stories that we were all told by our parents that, if you become an engineer, you will find many opportunities and you won't limit yourself to one career path. But we also share the common sense of humor and a common definition of friendship. And while we all came from different countries with different religions, belief systems, and traditions, with very, very distinct cultural identities, we were so drawn to our similarities rather than allow those differences to divide us. And this is just one of many experiences I've had since in the UK. And I used to always reflect about culture and identity, and I still do to today, because it made me realize that whilst I was raised in an environment with a unified and strong sense of culture, I was also fortunate to be raised in a family who encouraged me to explore different countries and cultures.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Eva. I think that's a very interesting perspective you've raised, highlighting the ways in which just being allowed to explore, I guess, to be inquisitive, to be curious in the way you were brought up, has then influenced not only your interaction in terms of family spaces, but even your interactions with people from other cultures, whether within education or in other things that you've done. And I think that just reminds all of us that parenting style has implications even beyond the family and sometimes could influence the ways in which the children and the young people interact with others in various spheres of life. Thanks for highlighting that for us. I think that's really a good way to start off the conversation. I'm just wondering if anyone else wants to add to that, the ways in which your experiences of parenting or the culture of parenting that was passed down to you has then shaped your own views on parenting. Does anyone want to weigh in at all? Anyone else?
Yeah, so yeah, I'll add in terms of, and I think the question still remains, how has culture shaped the way your family approaches parenting growing up? Is that correct?
Precisely, yeah.
Yeah, so I think in my own case, the emphasis is on community and collective responsibility. So growing up, there's that sense of collective responsibility that shaped how I grew up and of course how I parent today. Um, because in looking at our background as African, family and community are deeply involved in raising children, not just parents alone. And there's this saying that says it takes a village to raise a child. So so you growing up, you get involved with aunties, uncles, neighbors, and even elders in the community. So they all have a role in guiding children. So it and that what that did was it taught us respect, accountability, and the understanding that your actions reflects on your family and community. So in terms of parenting now, what that translates to, it translates to for me, it translates to teaching my children that they are part of something bigger than themselves. You don't exist in isolation. So their identity and belonging, it matters. And of course, one of the things that also pick is respect and discipline. Respect for elders, for others. Being disciplined. Discipline was once seen primarily as correction, but over time I've learned to balance that with open communication and emotional understanding, more or less blending those historical tradition with modern awareness. So that's how I would just summarize this in terms of how I think the culture has shaped the way I approach parenting nowadays. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Tolu. I could see nods across the screen, when you were speaking and talking about this aspect of culture linking to the community. So it's a sense that, in fact, the child doesn't belong to one person, but the child belongs to the entire community. So there's that sense of responsibility. And it even reminds me of speaking to young people and saying it's reciprocal. Because what then happens is that respect you show to the older person, because they're your auntie or uncle, even when you're not related by blood, you find that they become, in a sense, responsible for you as well. So in spaces, they feel that sense of, I have to intercede for this person because they identify me as uncle or auntie, even though we may not be related by blood. So that's something that I can totally relate to as well. And of course, you can tell where I grew up. Well, thanks a lot for that. That's very telling as well. Now, I'll take the conversation to our teams in the room. And the question I want to ask is, you've listened to, the adults. You've heard them talk about the importance of community, thinking beyond oneself, the importance of respect, the importance of reaching out to people, the importance of just building bonds with people, and the ways in which their own experiences growing up and the way they've been parented has influenced their approach to parenting, and I guess the ways in which they, or we, I should say, interact with you as teenagers and as young people. So the question I want our teens to reflect on is, what parts of the culture do you find most meaningful or indeed confusing? Because if you asked me, in this generation, I think one of the things I would find confusing is how I grew up in Nigeria and everybody's your cousin, simple as. Even for me, it was very confusing. I had to ask sometimes, how are they my cousin? How are we related? And you don't ask those questions. They're just related, full stop, because mommy says so or daddy says so. That's one of the things I found confusing. But I'd like to hear from our teenagers. What are those things that you find confusing about the culture? And what are those things you find most meaningful? Who would like to go first?
I can start.
Thank
I
you.
think, I think one of the most meaningful parts of my culture is the sense of community, as my dad said earlier, and the way people can come together under a common identity. I think there's like always this feeling, as you said earlier, that you're part of something bigger than yourself, whether it's through like helping a neighbor or like attending family gatherings and celebrating cultural festivals. And I think that gives people, and it certainly gives me, a sense of like pride and identity in myself. At the same time, it can also be like a bit confusing how they clash with modern ideals and modern life. For example, through the way that there's like certain customs and certain traditions that, as a Nigerian, those traditions aren't like widespread in the UK. Like it's only us that really do those things. So and at the same time, like, even though as a culture, Nigerians, they're very big on community and family, I think as a younger generation, there's a lot of value put into independence and questioning the norm. So it can be hard to find the balance between the two of them and like growing into our own selves and our own identities. But yeah, that's my view.
Well, thank you so much, Timmy. And I think that's something for us all to reflect on, isn't it? It's one thing, it's community. On the one hand, it's something that we're really proud of, but at the same time, it's also something that could be a bit confusing in terms of how do you balance that with your autonomy, especially within a setting like the UK where there's a lot of emphasis on individual autonomy, individual rights. How does that all work together? And if you even extend it, sometimes you hear people say things like Ubuntu. So the collective, the whole is bigger than the one or the parts. So how do you balance that with these ideas of individualism, autonomy, human rights as against people's rights? And I think that's something that is really I can totally relate to as well. Well, thanks for sharing that, Timmy. And it'll be good to know how you're able to manage that. So maybe just reflect on it, and then down the line, you could just share with us some of the practical things you do to balance that confusing or those tensions which sometimes could occur between the two. But thanks for sharing. Nifemi, would you like to share what you find most meaningful and then maybe confusing as well? We can't hear you, Nifemi. Are you muted? Can you try again? Okay. While Nifemi is trying to sort that out, I'll ask Tolu a question. Just based on all of these, and to wrap up this bit of the conversation around cultural context, do you think that there's such a thing as survival-based parenting? If yes, why or why not?
Yeah, I think survival based parenting, I think yes, there is. And just to put context into it so that we understand survival based parenting, I think it is a form of it's a form of parenting style that develops when parents' primary focus is on safety. I'll say safety, stability, or getting through immediate challenges, often at the expense of emotional connection or long-term development. So I do think survival-based parenting still exists, but is taking on new forms. For many of our parents, growing up, to them, survival meant making sure we are fed, educated, and safe, especially in places where opportunities were limited, or where being black came with extra challenges. For I'm from Nigeria, so for most African families, that often meant very strict discipline and high expectations. It's not because our parents didn't care, but it's because they care deeply. That's why they do that. It was their own way of preparing us for a world they knew could be tough. So today, many of us are parenting differently. We're at least we're more aware of our environment, especially because of the society we're in. We're more aware of mental health, emotional connection, and really the importance of letting our children express themselves. We still want them to be strong, right? But not at the cost of softness or vulnerability. So yes, survival based parenting, it still exists, but I think we're in a sort of transition. We're learning to keep the resilience our parents taught us, and while at the same time we're also creating space for healing and emotional growth and good mental health and mental state of our children. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that. That's very important, because again, this conversation about how were you parented and how are you parenting is an invitation for us to reflect on what is still valid today, what is still useful today, and what needs to change. Because as you mentioned, we know that the world is a lot more advanced on issues of mental health, eco anxiety, and just being in touch with oneself and one's feelings. So clearly, our approach to these matters have to be different as well. Our understanding of what it means to be a strong person, to be a resilient person, also needs to evolve with the time. So thanks a lot for that. And it leads us really nicely to the next bit of our conversation today, which is around discipline and protection. And I'll ask Phil, if you could weigh in at this point, Could you maybe share with us a bit more about your own perspectives on discipline? So how were you disciplined growing up, for instance, and how has your approach changed, or how do you see changes occurring in parent style of discipline in your generation compared to current ways of discipline that you see amongst parents?
Okay, so thank you very much for this beautiful question. So, growing up in an African home, discipline was part of the air that we breathe in. I just treat. So it was actually part of the growing up process. You understand? My father was the headmaster. That's what they call the head teacher now, and my mom was just a petty trader. It wasn't just about punishment, but it was actually about trying to shape characters, right? My parents used to say something like, the child you love, that's the child you correct. But the truth is, these corrections, they come in different forms. And at times it comes as a look, that kind of look when you misbehave, that kind of look like your parents will give you. And at times you freeze, just looking, no talking, nobody's beating you. Then you freeze. And at that point, your brain, that look alone just resets your brain and kind of realign you to do the right thing. So that was the kind of home I grew up from. And at another time, apart from just the look, there's some sign languages, growing up. And you need to know and understand that sign languages, especially when it involves a third party. I remember an instance, some people had come to visit my dad, some relatives, and they were having a conversation, and I don't know what happened to me that day. I kind of tripping my own thoughts about the conversation. In fact, it took the whole community that day just to save me. Because one, that was seen to be an act of disrespect. Nobody called you. In fact, you were not even supposed to be there where adults were talking. You came, you sat, and then you now see that was not enough. You went on to add to the conversation when you were not asked to. So that day, in fact, the discipline that day was for 2 weeks, I had to wash the dish for 2 weeks. You understand? And that for me, it wasn't really funny because I didn't like that. But as I grew up, I realized that that discipline they gave to us was actually from the perspective of love and care. The discipline came not because they hated us, but they wanted to build us such that we'll be able to face the challenges ahead of us. You understand? So as I grew older, I realized that, this thing has actually shaped me such that from this discipline, there were some transferable skills that I learned from those disciplines. One, respect. You just have to respect your elders, whether you like it or not. As far as someone is older than you, apart from your parents, like Tolu rightly said, the community, that respect was there. It was part of discipline. You understand? And they also taught us to use the 5 magic words then, like you're saying anything, you have to use thank you, ma. And you have it, you add a sa to it, you add a ma. You have to use some of it like sorry, ma, please, ma. So all of those 5 magic words we were taught while we were growing up. So now that I'm a mother, I try to kind of teach my children this same style, such that anywhere they go, that respect is there, resilience is there and all of that. But the style, the approach has to be different. It doesn't have to be the same hard approach, the hard love that our parents taught us, but now you have to consider their emotional intelligence. You have to come from that space. You understand? In as much as I want them to connect, I still believe in setting boundaries, right? But I also believe in conversations and dialogue. That I did not enjoy then. Nobody, in fact, your opinion was not needed then. They say do this, you do it. But now I believe in conversation, I believe in dialogue. And instead of using words like do as I say, I come now from the angle of let's talk about it. Let's know why this matters to us. Because discipline without dialogue builds distance. You understand? And I want connection more than control. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I think that just sums it up really nicely. Discipline without dialogue breeds distance. That should go into our our high points for today's conversation because I think it's something that we can all relate with. I remember growing up and hearing things like "do as I say" and not as I do. Which meant the adults were almost judged by a different standard, and the young people were just meant to go along and do what they were told to do and not ask questions about it. But clearly, as you've mentioned, all of that is changing very rapidly. And even the context, the society, because we're now in a society where children are being asked their opinions in schools, for instance. So children go to school and they ask them questions. What have you read? What do you think? Why was it like that? What do you think would happen next? So children are being encouraged to build the skills of inference, of analytical thinking, of public speaking. And so we can do no less but encourage those skills even in the home setting. So clearly there has to be a change in the way that these things are approached, but also remembering boundaries, like you've mentioned, because boundaries are really important. Boundaries are a way of keeping safe anyway. So whether it's online or offline, these are all important things to think about in the way we're parenting. So thanks a lot for sharing, Phil. I'll go to our young people, and I'd like to ask, still on this theme of discipline, one of the things that we find is for lots of young people, teenagers, the problem isn't necessarily discipline, but it's about how it is done or when or why, and usually the disconnect happens when from the teenager's perspective or the young person's perspective, that wasn't really the best way to do it, or that wasn't the right way to do it for whatever number of reasons. And so just picking up on this theme of discipline, but also dialogue and hearing from the perspective of young people, I'd like to ask, what kind of discipline feels fair or helpful to you? Because ultimately it is born out of love and it's supposed to be a positive influence on the life of the teenagers and young people. So if I can ask this question to our young people, what kind of discipline would you say is fair or helpful? And maybe I'll ask Abdul Rahman to start if that's okay.
A type of discipline that I would say is fair to young children is a discipline where it would make you feel like you're being corrected out of love rather than out of hatred and out of like responsibility, making you feel like you have to do this no matter what your opinion is. A discipline like where they'll correct you and it'll make it seem like their correction is right and perhaps you should go with it. Make it feel like they're correcting you out of love and not because they want you to do it the way they want it, but they want you to like make you be a good person, be a like and I say just responsible person. Yeah.
So thank you very much for it. And I think that's also a reminder to the parents and the adults in the room. The children, the young people, the teenagers, as we've heard from Abdulrahman, they need to understand why. They need to know the why because that will then help them. I can see nods from Pearl, so I hope I'm speaking the right language here. Well, otherwise it gets lost, right? So we should think about it as both parties, both the young person and whoever the adults need to understand why that is happening. But it also means we need to hear from the perspective of the young people as well, why they have done what they have done, so that they see where things may have been done differently, and so they can understand the discipline through that lens. Because sometimes from that conversation or from that dialogue, as Phil called it, you may understand a different perspective. So maybe the young person did something, but actually they were meaning a different thing from what came out of it. So that dialogue really helps, as part of the parenting and discipline approach to things. Well, thanks for sharing that, Abdul Rahman. Does anyone else want to add what makes discipline feel fair or helpful from the perspective of the young people in the room?
Yeah, I would like to say something about that. Thank you, Eddie. I remember a long time ago when we were younger, my mom was a very calm woman. Although she does more of talking than beating. So when she beats you, you've overdone it. And there's one method she used to use then. When you've done something really bad, then she sits you down, let you know what you've done, and asks you that, okay, if your child has done this, assume you're a parent, what would you do to discipline this child? So you are the one that will generate your punishment. So you know you are doing it to yourself. You've brought it to yourself. You can be the judge of yourself, and it lets you understand that yes, this is what I've done, and this is what I really deserve as a punishment. And after receiving that punishment, because you've been able to reflect, you don't see it as she hates you, but knowing fully well that yes, I've done something that is bad, and I think this is what I deserve. And so next time when you want to do such, when you want to hair again, you know that okay, I did this the other time, and this was the punishment. It helps you to be able to reflect, and that helps you to change your attitude rather than an outsider, or should I say your parents, a third party changing you, but you yourself thinking inwardly to change your attitude to be better.
Thank you so much for that. Just to give a bit of context, Fasilat has mentioned things like, beating, things like punishment, just to say that the beating doesn't mean like beating, the way it might be read in some contexts. But it could be things like spanking. But I know that in terms of the way we express it, we just say, oh, they beat the child. But sometimes it's as simple as a smack on the hand. Sometimes it could be something else, but it's not necessarily something that is a violent response to the child's behavior. The same way when we use words like punishment, it doesn't necessarily mean it's something cruel or inhuman or degrading. It's just a terminology that's used in some cultures. And I think, growing up in Nigeria, those are the terms we use, things like punishment, things like even flogging. But obviously, it is not flogging in the sense that you would describe it in standard English, if I use that term, where you take a stick and then you're hitting the person. No, nothing of that sort. So just to give a bit of context to that, but it's the idea is a child has done something, and then you're having a conversation with the child for them to understand or reflect on what has happened and why they could have done things differently. And I think that also shows how it's important for us to get children thinking about actions and consequences, even outside of when something has gone wrong. So I guess one of the things we can also reflect on is how we can imbibe that culture or that practice of action and outcomes or consequences, even in positive settings, which means if a child has done something great, you reward them by showing, oh, you've done this and this is the outcome. So this thing you've done has led to a good outcome or a positive outcome, and then there's a reward for it, so that we're not necessarily only keeping the consequences for when it's a bad thing or keeping the mention for when it's a bad thing. Because sometimes you also have young people complain and say, well, you only mention when I've done something wrong. What about all the times when I've done something good? So it's about remembering that discipline doesn't only happen when something has gone wrong and we want to correct. But as part of that bigger picture of discipline, it's also about reinforcing positive behavior and just teaching children in a non-confrontational setting and young people in a non-confrontational setting this idea of actions and consequences, and encouraging them to go more towards actions that bring about positive outcomes, not just for themselves, but for the wider community. Because like we mentioned already, within most Black communities, there's this big emphasis on everyone, not just you and what it means for you in that moment. So thanks a lot for sharing those. I think I see a question, and I'd like to put this forward as a way of closing this bit of the conversation around discipline and protection. So thanks for the question. And it says, at what point do you draw the line between discipline and abuse? Does anyone want to respond to that question? At what point do you draw the line? Yes, Tenny.
Yes, if I may respond to that, really. I think that particularly in our context as Africans or as Black people, and like we started before talking about culture, it's culture sort of like shared belief amongst a group of people that have like shared characteristics. So sometimes our culture determines how we react to certain things. And like I like that you did try to clarify the beating and the flogging issue and the punishment. Well, most people would say that these are things that served us in our community for generations, but I do know that there's been a paradigm shift. People are beginning to move away from the more punitive sort of discipline, which is why I try not to use the word punishment. I prefer to use discipline, because when you say you punish, it doesn't have any, I don't see any positive impact to a punishment. It's negative. Punishment is negative. So you must be able to find a balance and find a way of disciplining your child in a way that brings out the positives. Even though this child has done something wrong, you are trying to find a balance. You want them to know why what they've done is wrong. So you should have a conversation about it, preferably when nobody is angry. It's quite easy to get angry. Obviously, your child's done something you're not happy with. You're angry, maybe you don't actually agree with. I try to walk away from that situation at that point, and then you come back when you are calm, and then you have a sit down. Okay, this is what you have done. Do you see a problem with that? Usually, after a while, even the child is able to say, okay, I haven't done quite right. This is not quite right. So at that point, they're able to tell you, okay, I'm really sorry. I shouldn't have done this. Why? And then you're able to, we're having a conversation. I shouldn't have done this because this is what happens when I do this. So you have a conversation about it. And then you talk about consequences of your actions. So because you've done this, this is what has happened. And because this, I would like for you not to do this subsequently. You need to be better behaved. You need to know there's consequences for every action, whether positive or negative, and you do need to be responsible for your actions. And then you both agree on what seems like a fair response or sort of discipline. For most children, it might be depriving them of something maybe that they like for a reasonable amount of time. And when you've actually walked away from the situation when it was really bad, that's you de-escalating that situation. And in that point, you would avoid abuse, because when you are responding out of anger, the chances are it would degenerate into something else. Your child is probably hungry, you are hungry, you are shouting, your child is trying to respond. It will get you even more angry. And as Africans, we there are certain things that happens that we do not expect to happen. If I'm talking, I expect my child to not talk back at me. They do not understand that they think they're having a conversation with you, but I think you're talking back to me. And that makes me even more angry. So it's best for both of us to be calm. And then when we both calm, then we can talk about it and say, okay, this is what you've done. I don't think this is right because of certain things. And you're able to, see my own, we can come to a conclusion together to say, truly, this is wrong. And this is how we're going to resolve it. You're going to go off your tablet or your games for some period of time, or you're not going to get what maybe you should have gotten at that point. But when it has to degenerate into you shouting or you responding aggressively in that moment, the chances are that you may end up abusing your child even when you do not think you are abusing them. It's not only when you're flogging them or you've caused physical harm that is abuse. There can be verbal abuse, there can be emotional abuse. If you keep shouting at your child and all the time the only things you say to your child is negative words, that's abuse, and that's not good enough. You're not going to correct that child because in his mind he already knows, oh, she's going to start shouting again. Oh, I can never please you. There's nothing I can ever do that's enough for you. And I know that from our point of that's not what we're trying to do. It's just the way we've come across. And that's how the child sees you. And at a point it gets to that child, they stop trying to even please you because in their mind they think this is how you always respond. And it becomes even worse. Whatever it is you're trying to correct, it becomes even worse. So I think that the most important thing is you must learn to talk about, to communicate with your child. You must learn to, discuss consequences, and you must be able to help them to take responsibility for their actions. And we also as parents has to take responsibility for our actions. Some of us, we need to maybe relearn, and some of we need to let go of some of our beliefs and relearn our actions, or our the way we respond to things, and then we learn to move forward in a way that is mutually beneficial for both the parents and the teens, or the young children. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for that, Tini. I think you've touched on very important aspects of the work that we do, even at Afrikindness. So, for instance, some of the issues that we've highlighted in this bit of the conversation are linked to the module on safeguarding. So we have a safeguarding module at Afrikindness, which touches not only on safeguarding through the lens of what the law requires, but also tackles these deep-seated cultural aspects of parenting, which influence our approach to taking care of children, but also our approach to discipline of children as well. So the safeguarding module is one that comes highly recommended as part of our community empowerment program. So feel free to reach out to us if you yourself, your community is interested in this training. We've delivered in quite a few communities in Leeds, in Bristol, and we're expanding to other parts of the UK as well. And just to say that we've got two versions of the training. One is specifically for faith communities, because we know that, again, beyond the cultural aspect, faith systems, faith-based values also influence parents' approach to the entire parenting process, but also to safeguarding and child protection issues. And so we have the faith-based training, and then we have the cultural training as well, which is more tailored towards non-religious but cultural organizations from African and diverse communities. So feel free to get in touch with us if that's something you think might be beneficial in your communities. But otherwise, thank you so much for all the points you've raised. And I really like what you said about just taking a step back and not speaking or acting in anger, because a lot of the times when things go wrong in discipline or in the course of parents disciplining children, it has happened because either party has been emotionally charged and haven't taken a step back to de-escalate. So sometimes it just makes sense to step away from that situation, cool off, do something else. It's not a sign of weakness, but it's just a sign of just taking back charge of yourself first. Because if you're not in charge of yourself and your emotions, then clearly you can't be in charge of the situation, and you can't give your best self to the children and to the family. So please let us just reflect on this and think about times when maybe we haven't done it that way and what we could have done differently in situations. So just take a moment, all of us, and think about it. Are there times when you could have taken that step back to de-escalate as a way of improving the situation? And then maybe make a mental note for next time, because there will always be a next time. For next time, to take that step back, take that deep breath, step out of the room, and then come back, when things are quieter. And this applies both to our young people and our parents alike. But thank you very much for that. I think we can move on to the next bit of the conversation, and this is more around education and achievements. And of course, we all know how important education is from the perspective of lots of African families. And I know it's not just Africans who do it, because I've had conversations with colleagues from other settings as well, other cultures, and there's a lot of focus on educational achievement, especially within diverse communities. And so I'd like us to reflect on this. And the question I want to is, why is education often seen as a must-succeed area in many families? And this is something that anyone can weigh in on. So what do you think? First of all, is this something that resonates with your experiences? And why do you think that education is such an important aspect of development for most families within diverse communities, and especially Black families as well?
Thank you, Paddy. I'll be talking about that briefly. Looking back, I think what we've associated with education and achievement, the importance we've associated with education, is quite historical, dated back to a long time ago, where our forefathers were fighting for independence. They were clamoring for, being free from slavery. If you look at the likes of Kwame Nkrumah of Ghana, Obafemi Awolowo of Nigeria, they were all educated, and that education was able to help them to be able to gain independence for their countries. And our parents, forefathers, grandparents realized that with education, we are more empowered. We are able to get our voices to be heard. And as a Black community, it's with education you can stand at par with people from other parts of the world. And that is why I think Black families, Black parents has associated a lot of importance to being educated, to achieve something in life, so that you can also have your voice to be heard, so that we can liberate our families, we can liberate our communities. And we are so passionate about achieving that education, having these degrees, so that we can also make a difference. We can move from that place of being lower down in the hierarchy of that pyramid, and be at the top as well, and have our voices to be heard. So parents who look at their children, they want their children to be better than them. If I have a degree, maybe a BSc, I would want my children to have masters, PhD, to excel in their chosen field, whatever chosen field. I want them, even if my child says, okay, mommy, I want to be a chef or a musician, I'll say, okay, fine, you want to be this, but you have to back it up with a degree. You have to that's just it. You don't just have to be something without backing it up with education, because education will let your voice be heard. We set you aside. We make you shine brighter. That is what we believe in the Black community. And I can't blame us, because looking back, it was with education we're able to liberate ourselves. So I think that is why we are so passionate about education and why we must succeed. And we also feel that if we are spending so much, I know back home in Nigeria and probably in some other African countries, education is expensive. If you want to get good quality education, you have to pay for it. You have to pay for the books, you have to buy the pencils, you have to. So I don't want to spend money and to train my child, to educate my child, and the child is not taking it serious. So you want value for money. So we are always so passionate about our children excelling in their education, so that we think that, okay, in the future, they will be able to do better for themselves. They will not be set aside or pushed aside, and they will have a voice that can actually effect a change in the community.
Thank you so much for that, Facilat. I think that's a very important dimension you've mentioned, because essentially what we see today, just listening to you, is not a reflection of here and now, but is a reflection of the journey from years past, and the ways in which education has been very instrumental to the liberation, emancipation, and empowerment of diverse communities, Black communities in various periods. And I think building on that, for me, it's also the economics of it, because a lot of the times you find that with a degree, some people would earn a lot more than someone else who's doing very similar but just doesn't have the degree. And so even in some instances, the push comes from just understanding and seeing the value, the economic value, which having certain higher degrees confer on the person who has those degrees compared to someone else who doesn't, So the next person might be working really hard, but they just don't have the degrees to back it up, and so they might not earn as much as somebody else. which is perhaps also part of the reason why you find a lot of migrant families going back into the educational system, trying to get more degrees, trying to qualify in certain ways as a way of improving their economic chances and options as well. So thank you very much for that. I would ask from the perspective of our young people, and of course, if anyone else, any of the adults or parents want to weigh in, feel free to do so. Otherwise, I'd like to ask from the perspective of the teenagers, the young people, are you convinced about this whole talk of the importance we place on education as a Black community? And do you ever feel the pressure to overachieve? And if you do, how do you cope with it? Maybe I'll start with Pal, if that's okay, Pal.
Yeah. So my answer to the question is yes, that most Nigerian parents see education as like everything. They see it as like the key to success and like stability. So my mom always like says like something, so I'll like tell you what she says. She says that it's how you lay your bed, that's how you lie on it. She also says beat the best and beat the best. She also says like a lot of things. And sometimes she'll like sit me down and she'll be like, there are some things that there are 3 things she needs from me. It's like read my books, love God, and always like pray. And yeah. So how I coped with all this is like when my mom's not around, I like call my grandma in Nigeria and I'll like tell her about like everything that's going on. And she would always tell me that achievement isn't just about like results, it's about like growth. And in life, success also means being creative and happy. So yeah. And anytime I'm pressured, I always like remember my grandma always says like a lot of things like calm me down. So that's why I like calling her. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that, Pal. And I think it's very telling because you've just demonstrated towards that importance of community. And so Pal has mentioned the kinds of motivations, encouragement she gets from mom, but she says also there are times when she goes to grandma to decompress more or less. So grandma has that ability to understand, and of course, grandmas are always very partial towards the grandchildren. So I can imagine grandma may not be as forceful when it comes to the pressure on it. Where you can speak to someone freely, the person has your back, they want what's best for you, and you have their confidence, or they can maintain your confidence as well, but at the same time they will be guiding you in the right direction whether or not your parents are immediately there. So that's really very helpful. Thank you. Does anyone else want to speak to this? Any of the young people?
Yeah, I can speak to this.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Go
I
ahead.
think I think I also feel like the pressure to overachieve a lot of the time. I think there's this kind of like unspoken rule that if you have to be twice as good to be taken seriously, especially as a young Black person in this country, and it can be a bit exhausting because it makes you feel like your mistakes aren't really allowed or they shouldn't happen, and the pressure can come from like family, school, and even like society itself. I think the last time I really felt that kind of pressure was when I was doing my GCSEs in the summer. A lot of pressure from friends and family to perform, and what helped me was reminding myself that as I'm also doing this for them, I'm more so doing it for myself and for my future. And so what helped me was like taking breaks and setting myself realistic goals, and also like when my parents weren't around, surrounding myself with friends who like supported me, and that also helped quite a lot, as well as I think like celebrating the small wins, like celebrating after I finished one of my exams even though I had like 18 or 19 left, really helped me in that time. Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Timmy. And just to say that, I mean, if I can speak for all the adults in the room, it's the same thing for the older people as well. You know, we all feel that pressure every single day. There are days you walk into a room and it almost feels like you're carrying the weight of so many others who aren't in this space. I mean, if I speak for myself, I feel that a lot of the times. You walk into a room, you look around you, and you're thinking, this isn't just about you, Petty. This is about so many other people who are not in this space. And sometimes I feel like whatever I do or say or not say or do has implications for so many other people, right? And so that pressure is something that even the adults feel. I think that's the point I'm trying to make. So sometimes as young people, just be reminded and think about it that look, even this parents, even this adult is going through something similar. And so maybe you can have a conversation. And if it's getting too much, feel free to say, mom, dad, you know, auntie, uncle, or whoever the adult is, this is how this pressure is making me feel. And I want to believe they'll get it because they are also experiencing it in one form or the other. So that communication and open dialogue would be very helpful for all of us. And it's interesting because some of the things you've mentioned in terms of how you deal with it are things that I also do. And so, I mean, unfortunately, I don't have my grandparents anymore, but I have family members that I call to just distress when I want to. And then that thing about surrounding yourself with, in my words, I'll say with my village. So I surround myself with my village. I surround myself with people who can encourage me, you know, reinforce whenever I feel down, can hold me up. Those are the same kinds of things, believe it or not, that even the adults are having to do. So we could learn one or two things from you. So whenever you're feeling that pressure, rather than just hide it or run away from all of it or run away from that adult, maybe have a conversation with them and say, hey, really appreciate what you're trying to do, but this is how it's making me feel. And that might help them also check the kinds of or the amount of pressure they are mounting, and that could help them to be a bit more positive in the support that they're able to offer. Yeah. Well, thank you so much. It's something that we all experience in one form or the other.
Can I quickly add
Yes,
something
please.
that from us as parents, from our parents' point of view, I think we now need to start shifting the narrative from pressure to purpose. And I think the challenge now is helping our children see education not just as something they owe us, but as something that empowers them. So today's generation has more opportunity to define success broadly. During our own time, success are basically defined by the grade you come out with from school or the grade you get in exam in degree. But they have the opportunity to define success more broadly now, whether by creativity, innovation, or even emotional intelligence. So the goal isn't just to make it, as we normally say, it's more to hone your path with confidence and curiosity. So as parents, we are also learning to shift from saying you must succeed to more or less saying I'll support you to find what success means for you. Because in the world we are in, that definition of success, it varies on individual basis. So that's just the bit I just said I should add.
Thank you so much. And I think that's really important. You reminded us of something very important. Even this idea that as parents, you don't want to live through the child, right? Because I remember growing up, there were times when the adults would say, oh, you know, I wasn't able to do this, so you have to do it. So it's almost like you have to do that thing that I wasn't able to do. But clearly, part of what Tolu is saying is we need to rethink that. So if you really want to do that thing, parents, please go and do it. You know, you still have your life ahead of you. Go and do it and let the children define what they want to do, how they want to do it, provided obviously it's something that adds value to themselves and to the wider community. Then I guess the point is just support them through it. We have people who are graduating with degrees at 60s, 70s, 80s. So if any of you wants to do that PhD, please go and do it. That's the point, right? Don't put it on the children and young people if they don't necessarily want to go down that route. So that was just on a light note, but thank you. Thank you very much for that.
Eddie,
Yeah,
can I quickly say something? And
yes, please.
I think what Tolu said, it's really, really massive because I think what we used to associate with success, those good grades, degrees, has pushed a lot of young people in the past, probably my own generation, because I know of colleagues that sometimes they had to take stimulants to get those good grades, and a lot of people have gone down the bad lane just because they wanted to please their parents. So what we are doing now as the younger generation of parents is that okay, yes, you should do well in school, but not every child is brilliant in maths, it's exceptional in physics or chemistry. What do you like? What is your passion? Where do you want to excel? Then you look into if it's football, okay, how do we want to get into it? If it is, painting, that is where you can excel. Then how do we want to make it better for you instead of just thinking about the grades and making the children think of other things to do, taking stimulants just to be able to achieve those grades. So I think it's something we should start looking at. Or I would say we are already looking at since this generation, and let those children say what is their definition of success and support them. We can't always all be engineers. We can't always all be lawyers or doctors. What the line have you chosen? What do you enjoy doing? Then we can support our children to be the best version in whatever they've chosen.
Well, thank you very much for that. And I think just that point you made, another thing that personally I struggled with growing up was, and this was not to do with parenting, but this was to do with the educational system that I grew up in, where you had to study things where you didn't necessarily know why you had to study them. So for instance, I was doing further maths and I was thinking, what do I have? What has that got to do with me? Or I was doing as a law student and then I was doing history and politics and government and economics. And I'm thinking, why? Now I know why. But the point is, perhaps if someone had told me then why, I would have been a bit more, I would have gotten more out of it. So, for instance, something as basic as maths and English, just survival skills. There's a reason why when I studied in Nigeria, I was studying law, but I had to pass maths and English. Then it was like, why do I have to pass maths? I mean, I'm studying law, but now I know why, because it's really basic, it's really survival, it's really about the logic of things. And so part of what we could also do as parents to encourage young people in studying, perhaps, is to try and understand what the curriculum is, why it is there, and how it can help the children become well-rounded so that they can also see it from that perspective, so that it's not just a tick box chore, but it's something that they actually understand the value that it adds for them in the long run as well. So let's move on to the last segment of the conversation for today, which is more around resilience and joy, because we always want to end on a high note. And the question I'd like us to reflect on is, we've spoken a lot about Black families, diverse families, African families, and the experiences of growing up in those settings, the experiences of parenting and how this has affected the ways in which the older generation is parenting the younger generation, issues of discipline and protection, education and achievement. In keeping with the theme of Black History Month and family and culture and parenting, I'd like us to reflect on what makes each of us proud of your identity and heritage. And perhaps, Eva, you could go first if you wish to. What makes you proud of your identity and heritage?
Thank you. So I think first I would like to reframe this question, because I wouldn't say I'm proud of my identity. Maybe I'm grateful for it, because I feel like the word pride, in terms of national pride, has some negative connotations. And in a world that's full of conflict, the last thing I want to be is more divisive. So I would say I'm grateful for my identity, because I feel lucky to be raised in an environment that has a strong support network and a strong sense of community that is centered around cultural heritage and ancient history in Greece. But one of the values that really resonates with me, and I try to bring it forward to my diverse community of friends in London, is hospitality and the freedom of expression, because these are very important aspects to the culture. And while these values are quite common across cultures, I feel like the way this manifests in Greek culture is slightly different. For example, inviting someone over to your house, helping a friend out, getting flowers for someone does not come with an expectation that the favor will be returned. What I mean by that is giving and helping is not even seen as a favor at all. It's more like a fundamental aspect of any relationship, friendship. And whether you're not asked by a friend or not to support, it doesn't matter. Even if they don't ask you, you have to proactively show up for people, even if they said they're happy to be alone. And that's quite ingrained in the culture. And I only came to realize that difference when I connected with people from different nationalities and what hospitality actually means for different cultures. That's the main one. And the second one actually is the diet. I'm very grateful of the diet because I feel like in the UK, for example, and many other countries, there has been a trend in the last 5 or 10 years about being healthy, being vegetarian, consuming less red meat, more vegetables. People look at like nutrients and saturated fat, so they're becoming very educated and very scientific in the topic. But if you look at Greece, that has been the staple diet. So coming out of war 75 years ago, the country was in poverty, right? So people had access to beans while meat was more expensive. So bean soup became the national dish. And Greek diet is now known as one of the healthiest diets in the world because olive oil, beans, vegetables, fish, because of the geography and the climate, were just key ingredients that are very cheap and very accessible to people. Whereas if you look at the UK, if you want to get organic peaches or some sort of vegetable, is way, way more expensive, and actually unhealthy food is more accessible.
Thank you so much for those. I mean, that's the point you make about hospitality. As we were speaking, I was just reflecting on what that means even for me in my own culture. And that thing about when you're in a diverse community, you also have to think and try and understand what it means for the next person. Because when you were speaking and saying, even if the person doesn't ask, you still sort of give of yourself because that's what you do. And I was just thinking in some settings that could be well received, in other settings, maybe not as much. So it's just interesting how different cultures would approach the same thing very differently. I remember, for instance, the first time I was in a setting outside of Nigeria and I went to a party and someone was saying, also, you pay for your drinks. And I was thinking, okay, that's very, very new to me because from where I come from, if someone says come to a party, then, oh, it's all catered for and you don't even come with a wallet. You just show up and you just, eat your fill. But that's the culture. And so you learn to understand what that culture is without judgment, but just understand that this is what it means and also learn how to be part of that without necessarily losing your own culture. Because when I go to a Nigerian setting, I would act very differently because I know the expectations there are different from when I'm in a different setting that has people from other cultures. But yeah, thanks so much for sharing. And then the point you made about food as well. Of course, food is really, really important. And again, it's a very cultural aspect of our lives. The way we even eat the same things, very different and something we should all be grateful and happy for, really. So thanks for sharing. Yeah, does anyone else want to weigh in on this?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay,
Go ahead,
so yes, for me, a lot of things, make me proud of my identity and my heritage, like the food, which Eva has rightly mentioned, the love we share, the community as a whole. But the one that is really outstanding for me is the resilience. Yeah. So it just run in our DNA. Like anywhere you go, you always see Nigerians, and irrespective of whatever is happening around them, they're always working hard. They're laughing loud, creating something out of nothing. Even when life humbles them in Nigeria, you still see some people will say, oh, it go better. So that resilience is always there. We don't give up easily. That spirit, that hope is what makes me proud of my identity and my heritage. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that. And just for those who may not understand, when you say it go better, it means things will get better. So no matter how, bad it seems at the moment, there's that hopefulness that things will turn for the better. It's like at the end of every storm, there's a silver lining, right? Yeah, something like that. So thanks a lot for sharing that, Phil. And Phil's mentioned the point about resilience, which is also something really important in the context of today's conversation. And I would like to ask perhaps Pearl to share with us, what does resilience mean for you?
Oh, just
So to me, resilience means like not giving up even when things are like very tough. And like I've seen it through my parents, like moving from Nigeria to UK and starting afresh. And I still feel I'm still like finding ways to like smile and like stay strong. And I have felt myself in like I felt in myself like learning to fit into like a new place while holding on to who I am. And like resilience isn't just about like being strong, it's also about like getting back up when life like knocks you down and reminding yourself, oh, have made it through life before and I can do it again. And like resilience is like a quiet strength that keeps you like moving forward no matter like what comes your way.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Pearl. And just picking up on the points you made about, it's not just about being strong, but it's about standing up again, no matter what comes your way. I think that's something we always have to remind ourselves about, because a lot of the times, especially in these days of social media, we see the celebrations. So people will come online and say, oh, I've got a new job, oh, I've got this, oh, this has worked out for me, oh, I've had 7 A's or whatever it is. But what we don't come out and say is, it's been a bad day today. I've had a rejection letter. I've had a no, I've lost this and I've lost that. So we have to constantly remind ourselves that forget the social media buzz. There's always the other side. Life has got two sides. And what I always tell myself, and I tell especially people who, for instance, are looking for jobs, and they say, oh, there's so many rejection letters. I always get a rejection letter. I said, well, yes, but you don't get an acceptance if you don't put out that letter. So the point is, yes, there are down times, but you just have to remember that, as we said before, there's always hope. There's always the hope for a better future, a better outcome, and you just have to keep at it. But in the process, do take care of yourself, rely on your village, rely on your support networks, but just know that you have to keep pushing and hoping for a better outcome. I see a hand up. Is that Nifemi or Tenny? Nifemi, yes, please.
Yeah,
Go
I
for
would
it.
like to add to what you said. So, what resilience means to me is like always getting back up, no matter how many obstacles you face, like continuing to try and continue to attempt at something, even though you may not have done well in the past, like learning and improving from your mistakes and just not giving up and continue to try at something and attempt it and like try harder and just keep going until like you reach your goal and just always get back up no matter how many times you've been like knocked down.
Thank you so much for that. And it reminds me of something. You know the word fail, F-A-I-L. I saw something about fail that really stuck with me. And it was them saying the F is further attempts in learning. So fail is not an end in itself, but to think about it as further attempt in learning. So if you do something, it doesn't work out, you've learned how not to do it for next time. So what does it mean? It means next time you do it differently rather than just let yourself be beat down because, oh, it hasn't worked out this time. So for me, that's something I've tried to start imbibing in my approach, in the way I relate with people, the children and others around me. Fail, further attempt in learning. Okay, we did it this way, it didn't work. Next time we've learned how not to do it and we'll try something else to see if we can get a different outcome. So thank you so much, everyone, for engaging in today's discussion. I think it's been very enlightening. I hope it's also been liberating because we've all shared from our personal experiences, perspectives. I've picked up a few things listening to the young people, but also the adults in the room. I hope it's been the same for all of you. Before we close now, if anyone else has anything they'd like to add as a parting shot, feel free to do so. I'll start just based on the order on my screen. Eva, is there anything you want to say before we go?
I was just reflecting on, how we could celebrate culture moving forward and thinking of, the context of the UK and the fact that it's a very diverse ethnically and culturally country. And, places like London. I feel like creating space for communities to come together and celebrate that is something we should think more about. And then, there's a lot of ignorance across communities, and finding common grounds with other communities, be traditions, the food, the dance, and inviting diverse people to join is a very, very good way not just to celebrate ourselves but also raise awareness of cultural differences.
Thank you so much for that, Eva. Tenny and Nifemi, of course.
Right. Thank you. It's actually been a very wonderful time being here today, and I think I've learned quite a few things. And what I would like to say about, culture is there is I've come to realize there's a beauty in diversity. And what I always tell my children is that you don't have to conform. You can be yourself. You can be a black person, a black child in a predominantly white environment, and still enjoy yourself and do all what you need to do. And I think that that's actually that's the beauty of being host in this environment. You bring your own perspective, which is different. You learn other people's perspective to things, to life, to help doing things, and you could take a blend of both worlds and come out being the best for it. Get the best of both worlds and move with it and do whatever you need to do with it and be a better person, a better version of yourself. I like the communal spirit that we have in Nigeria. Nigerians we go getters. We don't give up. That's what Nigerians are known for. And usually if you find a Nigerian somewhere, they are likely going to be doing really well. They're likely going to be doing really great. They don't take no for an answer, which can be a good thing. Sometimes we can be a little bit too much, which is and that's the place of learning, other people's culture. When you've been your go-getting self, they think you're being aggressive, so you have to learn to tone it down while at the same time you still assert yourself. But you get to tone things down, and you find a way to balance it, to modulate your voice, so you still get what you need to do, but in a nice way, in a way that doesn't make your colleagues or people around you feel threatened or less of themselves. Thank you. No.
Nifemi, I thought you wanted to say something as well. No? Okay, excellent. Thank you so much for that, Tenny. Basilat and Abdul Rahman.
Thank you so much, everyone. It's been a reflective evening, thinking about everything in general, and thinking about our culture, what it means, and thinking about our society being multicultural, learning and relearning, and changing what needs to be changed, and reinforcing what needs to be reinforced as part of our culture and our identity. And thinking about resilience too and what it means. And there's a point Dr. Tenny just made about despite Nigerians being go-getters, by toning it down, getting what you want in a way that is acceptable to people around you in this multicultural environment. Because what you think in your culture is normal, it's okay, may not be acceptable elsewhere. So it's beautiful having different cultures and we interacting with each other amicably. So thank you so much for this reflective evening. It's been awesome.
Thank you for sharing with us. We've really enjoyed having you here as well. Phil and Pell.
Thank you very much for making this, for giving me this opportunity to be part of this conversation. And what I would say at this point is that as parents, we have to trust our children enough to grow, right? And then we should always remember that we can't stop every storm, but we can help them, build their umbrella. So let's always be there for our children. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that. Thank you. Thank you, really. Tolu and Temi.
Yeah, I think my last contribution is basically for us parents that we need to evolve. I would say evolve from hierarchy to connection. And what I mean by hierarchy is where how we were parented in terms of our parents being like the person that knows everything, all in all. We can't challenge them, and then there's that hierarchical connection between parent and us. But for us, we are our parenting style needs to involve the children. So it should lean more towards connection. Yes, our culture taught us respect and duty, but we now need to see that listening and empathy can also deepen those values. So we need to intentionally create psychological safety for our children so that they can share their thoughts freely while still understanding those boundaries and values, the respect and the duty there. And the fact, if we allow them to be able to share their thoughts freely, and then that, I think, will deepen that family connection, and we'll have opportunity to be able to empower them the more. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that. And I think it's just, my heart is full of thanks. And I think I'm speaking the mind of, or the minds of our audience as well. Thanks to all of you for giving of yourself, your time, your experience, your insights to share with us today and to celebrate the Black History Month. Just to say that we have a survey that's open at the end of every session, like we've done today. We always want to get your feedback because your feedback allows us to do better. So how have we fared in today's webinar? What have you enjoyed? What could we do differently? And what would you like us to put forward in our subsequent programming? So we're looking forward to having your feedback. It's a very short one, couple of minutes and you're done, but it'll be really great for us to hear from you. The other thing is for our teens, especially, drum roll, you still have, I think, 2 days to the end of the teen writing competition. And so if you haven't started already, what's your excuse? You're on half term now, so you've got all the time in the world. So please put together your essay. We want to hear from you. The theme is about untold stories of Black women and men in history. We want to know who your hidden figures are, who inspires you as part of the Black History Month celebration. If you scan the QR code or if you go on the website, you get all the information about the competition. But it's a very short essay we want from you, just about 500 to 800 words. Tell us about someone, unsung Black hero. Tell us about their legacy that inspires us today and how you think this is making a change for you or for people around you. And then more for our parents. The link to that is also in the chat. So just in case you haven't scanned the QR code, feel free to just click on the link and then you'll see all the details there. And more for our parents, I mentioned the safeguarding training. And so this QR code would allow you to give us information if you're interested in the training. We're doing this in collaboration with Voluntary Action Leads as well. So just get in touch if you would want to get trained or if you want us to come into your community, and we'll be more than happy to facilitate that process for you. Now, for all the webinars we run, we have a dedicated parents resource page where there are lots of resources available for free. So I'll encourage you to just go online, click on this, and you'll see lots of information that we've gathered all through the years since starting this webinar series. And you may very well find something that is useful for you or for someone you know, because all of these resources cut across the various teams in our community empowerment program. So we have resources on neurodiversity, self-care, mental health, GCSE A levels, various things really, and they're all freely accessible. So please feel free to go online and access the resources for yourself and for those around you. We also have recordings of past events, and today's session will also be hosted so that you can have access to the details after now. Then I'd like to tell us about the teachers training workshop that's coming up on the 19th of November. So that is online and it's focused on teachers. But of course, there's always something to learn, whether you're a teacher yourself or you're just someone who's interested in the education of young people. The theme is on empowering teachers, inspiring futures. And we're going to be looking at not just the training of teachers and educators, but also wellness. Now, this is tailored for our team in Kenya. But with it being online, there's an opportunity for all of us to get involved. Now, one of the themes on the 12th of November is on building educators' self-esteem. And obviously, self-esteem is something that's important for all of us as we work with young people, right? So it might be one that we're able to learn something from if we join in. And then on the 19th of November, there's going to be a session on improving foundational literacy. So how do we guide young people through building their literacy skills? And on the 29th of November, it will be around understanding cell in context. So please feel free to sign up or share the information across your networks for people who might be able to benefit from these resource. And it's free, it's for free, it's provided with experts, as you can see on there. And finally, all that's left, I think, is to say a big thank you to everyone who's been part of our session for today, to our esteemed panelists, to our audience, to our young people especially. Thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of Black History Month and look forward to connecting with you somehow, sometime soon. Do take care and enjoy the rest of your evening or day wherever you may be. Thank you.